Welcome to Working Together and Writing Together. In this lesson, you'll learn to use track changes and comments to collaborate on document content and learn how to use the compare feature to reveal changes between document versions. Since not all document co-creation is friendly, we'll also show you how to ascertain when others have attempted to conceal changes. We'll cover features which are available for Microsoft Word for Windows or Mac.
Hello, and welcome to Working Together and Writing Together. Today we're going to cover track changes, comments, and comparing documents. I'm Ivy Gray from WordRake, and I'm with Baron Henley from Affinity Consulting. Are you ready, Baron? Take it away.
All right. Hi, everyone. So as Ivy mentioned, we're going to be focusing today on the review ribbon in Word. And I'm going to start with track changes. So track changes allows you, if you want to indicate your proposed changes to a document, it's perfect for that. And if you are sending like first draft of a document to opposing counsel and you like their input, or maybe it's a client or whoever, you would probably prefer that they use track changes so that they can easily indicate to you the changes they would like to see in the document. So the button is a two-part. There's a top and a bottom of track changes. Again, I'm on the review ribbon to initiate this. The top button simply turns on track changes. The bottom of it gives you some additional options. Now, depending on the version of Word you have, I have 3 options. You might only have 2. In earlier versions, I've got Microsoft Word 365 and the latest iteration. So they've kind of split out the track changes so I can do it for everyone or just my changes. Previously, you just had 2. There was lock tracking was here, but otherwise it just said track changes. So you could lock tracking or you could turn it on. Now you have just a few more options, right? So anyway, I'm just going to turn it on. I'll just click the top of the button and turn it on. So you can see what it does. If I wanted to add a new date for this, so the first thing I'm going to do is select and delete that. And now, depending on the version of Word you have, you may see when you hit delete, it may end up showing up out in a they call this a balloon, even though it's clearly a rectangle. But if you don't like when you delete text and it ends up in the margin, if you would prefer the deleted text to remain in the document but be struck, then you just have to make one little change and it'll start doing that for you. And that is, you click on the little show markup button down to balloons, and then you want to choose show only formatting in balloons. And again, depending on your version, that might say show only formatting and comments in balloons. So again, I've got the latest version, but pick the bottom option. And when I do that, now you can see it pulls back the deleted text into the body of the document. Now, when I add new text, it's going to put it underlined also in a different color. Okay, you might wonder, well, why is it red? Word automatically assigns a different color to each author that touches the document. So today I'm red. I've seen it be other colors, and you don't really have a control over that. It's going to give you a color, and it's going to be different than other people that might touch the document.
I'm going to go ahead and jump in here.
Yeah.
Sometimes you will see people who want to show that they've made changes, but they're not actually using track changes. And what they're doing is manually applying formatting to the changes they've made. For instance, they might highlight February 19th, change it to strike through and turn it red, and then underline April 13th. And so you can't actually accept or reject those changes. It just appears to have been changed. So you get the benefit of having the change pointed out, but the document is not actually functional, and you don't want that.
Yeah, so, and you can tell, like, I'll just put that same thing here. Let me turn off track changes real quick first. And I'll just type February 19, April 13. So what Ivy was saying was, I could select this whole thing, go to the home ribbon and make it all red. And then I could select the February 19 and I could make it strike through manually. And I could select this and make it underline manually. So how would you be able to tell the difference? Well, if you right click one that's using actual track changes, you're going to get some options to accept the deletion, reject the deletion, or track changes. If I do that over here, you see I don't get those options. Okay, because that was just typed. And this is like, I've had people send me red lines like this, and it is super annoying because it's so difficult to incorporate the changes into the document. If you use track changes, then if I go back to the review ribbon, I can start at the top of the document, hit next, and I can accept or reject each one of these changes, hit next, and it'll surf through the document and find each one. So if I were to go back to this one and say next, if you accept a deletion, then it's going to remove it. And if I reject a deletion, it's going to take off the strike through and put it in black text. And the opposite is true, of course, if it's an insertion. If I accept it, it's going to put it in, take off the color in the underline. If I reject it, it's going to take the whole thing out. So that's the huge benefit of this, is it's very easy and fast to incorporate those changes that you agree with into the document. Whereas if they were manually typed, then not so much. Now I want to show you one other thing about how this presents on your screen. Up here, you've got a button at the very top that has 4 choices. The top one, simple markup, will show you the document as it would look if all of the changes requested were in fact incorporated into the document. The only reason I know something happened on this line is the red bar floating out here in the margin. Now, so the deleted text is still here. I just can't see it. And if you flip the switch to all markup, then you can see it again. Some people find that while they're making changes to the document, it's easier to stay in simple markup because it looks like it would look if I didn't have track changes on. So, if I delete this paragraph, it disappears, right? But if I go back up and switch to all markup, I didn't have track changes on. Let me turn track changes on again. Forgot I turned it off. So if I go back to simple and I delete this paragraph, it looks like it's gone except for the red line out there. But if I go back up here and switch it to all markup, you can see clearly that paragraph was deleted, and it does have evidence of that. It was just concealing it from me. Now, the other two. I
also want to point out that if you are co-authoring a document with opposing counsel or someone else who may not be privy to all of your internal deliberations, using track changes properly and then clearing your metadata becomes far more important. The things that you delete can be evidence of your thinking or an overall scheme or plan regarding your approach to litigation or acquisition, et cetera. So learning to use track changes, recognizing where changes have been tracked, and making sure that you use them only when you intend to, it is incredibly important for confidentiality purposes and for your technology competence.
Absolutely. And I'm going to touch on that in a second. I just want to show you these last two. No markup would show you what it would look like if all the changes were incorporated in. In this case, there's no visual evidence that changes were made. There's no red line out here in the margin, but those changes are still here. If I switch back to all markup, of course, they're visible again. And then not surprisingly, if I choose original, it'll look like it did before I made any changes to it. But again, the changes are still here. So what used to happen back in the day when I was your age, older versions of Word, if I had saved this document in no markup mode, when I opened it later, it would remain in no markup mode. And so how are new documents created in law offices? Well, I can tell you, nobody starts with this. Everybody starts with typically an existing document or a template for a similar document you drafted for a similar case previously. They open it up, save it as a new file name, and make changes to it. Well, the use of track changes previously could have been a landmine because I could open this up, change the names of the parties, and save it and email it to opposing counsel, and then opposing counsel would come up here and say, "Show me all markup," and see evidence of prior negotiations of that document, which could be malpractice, obviously. So in subsequent versions of Word, I think it was in Word 2007, they flipped a switch in Word's settings so that if you open up a document which contains tracked changes, it will automatically show them to you. It did not do that previously. As a result, malpractice occurred. And some mythology was developed around that if you use track changes at all, there's no way that you can conceal these previously tracked changes. And I just want to point out that that is completely false. For example, if I select these and I accept both of those things, see how now it says April 13th? If I go back up here and I go to original, it doesn't switch back to the date it was before. If I go to no markup, it doesn't change. If I go to all markup, it doesn't change. If I go to simple, it doesn't change. And that's because those changes were incorporated in because I accepted them. They would be gone if I had rejected them. But until and unless you accept or reject the changes, they are not gone. So it's important that you understand how to use this. So the problems were caused because people didn't know how to use this. And Word would sometimes conceal, just because it had been saved in a particular view, it would retain that and it would not automatically toggle to all markup when you opened it, and then people would miss things. So just keep in mind that yes, it does work, and you will not, end up causing yourself some kind of problem as long as when you finalize the document, you accept or reject all the changes. And staying in all markup view will make that fairly obvious, right? There's even little checkboxes in the settings we'll talk about when we cover that in a subsequent class, where you can have it warn you every time you try to do anything with a document that contains tracked changes. And then furthermore, there is a metadata removal tool built into Word, which will find and remove this stuff if you forgot. Well, more on that later as well. Okay. Some other stuff you can do here. You'll notice that if I hover over a change, it pops out a little window that says Baron K. Henley on 22322, blah, 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 deleted this. So you need to be aware of the fact that when you make tracked changes to a document, it does tag it with your name and the date and the time that change was made. So why am I putting this out? Because lawyers love to print out documents and mark them up with a pen and then give them to somebody else and say, can you please enter these changes into the Word document for me? Okay, be aware of the fact that those changes are not going to be tagged with your name. And if you want them to be tagged with your name, there's a way to accomplish that. All right, so now this is another little weird thing about Word's settings. In the bottom right-hand corner of many of the groups of buttons, this being the tracking group right here, I'll zoom in on this. There's a tiny little arrow. And the little arrow doesn't look like a button, but is in fact a button. If you click on that, in this case, it shows you your default settings for the track changes functionality. And one of the things you can do is change username. So if you click on change username, it will take you to the spot in Word settings where you can put in a different name and initials, click OK, make the changes. It'll tag the changes with whatever name and initials you put here. And then when you're done, you can come back and switch it back to your name. So if you're making the changes on behalf of somebody else, just be aware that you can change this. It doesn't hurt anything, but that's where it gets the name and the initials for the person who made the changes.
It can also be helpful if several parties are working on the changes and it doesn't matter which person representing the party made the change and you want to aggregate them. So if you want to say these are all of Corporation A contributions and these are all of Corporation B contributions and these are all of Corporation C contributions, then you can change the name accordingly. And you don't have to remember that John Smith represented A and Susie Q represented B. Instead, all of the changes show up as part of their respective parties. And you can do that with these labels.
Great point. Another thing that it does that a lot of people dislike is that if you change formatting, it will track that. Okay, so you see out here it says, Baron Henley a few seconds ago made the formatting bold. And here's how many people care. Nobody cares about this. Like, if it's a different word, I want to know. If they just formatted it differently, don't really care. And if somebody has reformatted a bunch of stuff, it can make the red line really difficult to read because there's so many balloons floating around about formatting stuff. You can simply toggle that off. So under show markup, I could go in here and say, if I just left click on the word formatting, it will stop showing me formatting changes. And a lot of people would prefer not to see that stuff. So if that's the case, go here and just click that. If I do want to see it, I can check it back in again. Another thing to be aware of under show markup is the specific people option. So if 3 people had made changes to this document, when I click on specific people, I will see all of their names. If I only want to see certain of them, I can uncheck names of the people I don't want to see. Now, their changes will still be evident on the face of the document. However, it doesn't add color to them. So in other words, the only changes I want to see are of a different color. You'll notice if I uncheck my own name, I can still see February 19th and April 13th. They're just not red anymore. So it just makes it easier to read. If you want visually to only see the changes from a particular person, you can simply make only theirs in color and everybody else's not in color.
Use case for that would be, say, somebody who's offering substantive edits and another person who is really a stickler for grammar. And you might not want to pay as much attention to these small grammatical changes and movement of words. For instance, only might be on the wrong side of the word. We might not care about that. But the person who is the subject matter expert has made changes, and you want to pay close attention to the subject matter expert's changes. So that would be probably the best use case for that feature that we just showed you.
Yeah, good point. One other little trick with this. Let's say there were a bunch of formatting changes, and I didn't want to just conceal them. I wanted to accept all the formatting changes. Like, okay, enough with your formatting. I just want to get these all out of my face. There is a way when you click the accept button where you can say, see where it says accept all changes shown and it's grayed out? That's because right now I can see everything. So if I go up here and I say show markup and I uncheck insertions and deletions, now the only thing that's still visible are the formatting changes. And then I can say accept, notice it's now lit, accept all changes shown, boom. Now all the changes they asked for from a formatting perspective have been incorporated into the document and will stop bugging me. Then I can go back to show markup and say, okay, show me everything again. So you can be selective in what you accept in bulk, and you'll notice there's an accept all changes and there's a reject all changes option in there as well.
Do you want to show how you can highlight and accept some changes in bulk or highlight and reject some changes in bulk?
Yeah, but before I do that, I want to show one more thing, which is if let's say, like I sent an hourly services agreement to a big company a couple of days ago, and it was a simple document, but of course they have to send it through legal, and legal just absolutely butchered it. And they added so much stuff and deleted so much stuff, and it was all the same color, and I found it really hard to read. So I'm not stuck with these colors. You can selectively change them. So again, I go to the little default settings down arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of tracking, and then I can click on advanced options down here. When I click on that, here is why they are colored by author. So I could say, look, I don't care who made the changes. I want all the new stuff to be blue and all the deleted stuff to be red. When I click OK, it's going to change all of that to blue and red. Now, if this was really, really marked up, I find this to be much easier to read when the new stuff is in a different color than the deleted stuff. And I want to point out, this does not save or get incorporated with the document. This is just the lens through which Word is showing you this document. If I emailed this document to somebody else who hadn't changed any of their default settings, all the deleted text is going to show up in a balloon out in the margin, and all my changes are going to be in the same color. So I'm not affecting anybody else when I do this. You don't have to worry about, oh, someone else is going to look at this and it's going to be all messed up. No, it's not. It depends on what their settings are. And I can at any time go back into that same setting and switch it back to by author, in which case it'll put all the changes in the same color. Okay, so now let's say I got this marked up document. I go to the top and I say next, and I can go one at a time and go accept, reject, accept, reject. Depending on what you're doing, that might take more time than you're willing to spend. Method number 2 is you can simply right-click a proposed change and accept or reject it individually. But again, you're going to have to do that for each one. Sometimes I see a bunch of changes. I'm like, yeah, I'm good with all that. Okay, then just select it. I can select, you don't have to be precise about it. I select all that and I just go accept. Okay, and now all of those changes were incorporated in at once. Or if the entire document changes, like sometimes somebody on my team, somebody that works for me will send me a document and say, hey, we need to get this vendor agreement signed. Would you mark it up so we can finalize this? And I'll go through and make the changes, but I will use track changes so they can see what I wanted to change. So the next time they'll know what I'm likely to want to change. And they can just go through and read through it, go, okay, I totally get it. And then come up here and say, accept all changes. And then in one click, your document's in final format. Or, of course, you could have rejected all the changes and put those back. So there's a lot of ways to kind of go through and in bulk accept or reject. You can do the whole document, or you can select big chunks of it and just click accept or reject as appropriate, and it will get rid of them or incorporate them in. Now, one of the
case there might be where someone has attempted to or suggested changing references, so block quotes from a case, and they got a little enthusiastic and they thought that they should be able to change what the Supreme Court wrote. And obviously you cannot change that. So that would be a great use case for selecting that entire block quote and rejecting all changes to it.
Okay, so sometimes I put together first draft of a document and I want to email it to a hostile party like opposing counsel, and I'd like them to indicate their proposed changes. I would like them to use track changes. Okay, well, they may or may not use track changes. And if you get a document back from somebody else that has some evidence of track changes having been used, there's no proof that they tracked all of the changes. I mean, this is a light switch. I could turn it off and make some changes and then turn it on and make some changes. So you don't know what they did. So you might want to turn on track changes and then lock it on. And so I'll turn this off. That's this bottom option, lock tracking. So if I choose this, it's going to ask me to enter a password. And then after I enter a password, I just want to show you what it disables. You can no longer turn off track changes. See, it says this command is currently disabled. You cannot accept or reject a change. You can just make a change. You can't delete a comment. You can just add a comment. And the only way they would be able to defeat that would be for them to know my password. Now, I do want to point out that just because I've locked on track changes doesn't mean someone can't select the whole document, copy it, paste it into a new document, do whatever they want. But I would know that's what they did if they sent the document back to me and track changes were no longer locked on, or my password I used didn't work to unlock it. And in that case, we'd be over here comparing what I sent them in the first place against what they sent back to me, which I would still be able to discover whatever changes they had made. But the lock tracking is a really great option. And sometimes it's just the person I'm interfacing with, it's just not tech savvy. And I would say, do you know how to use track changes? And they're like, what's that? I'm like, okay, never mind. I'm just going to lock it on and send it to them and say, okay, just make the changes you want to make. And if you find it confusing to see all the deleted text and the underlined text, then just go up here and choose simple markup, and it'll look like you're just making changes to the final document, but I'll still be able to see what those changes were when you send it back. Okay, so that's another thing you might want to consider. Anyway, I'm going to unlock tracking. I didn't put a password on it, so it didn't ask me for a password. You can actually lock tracking with or without a password. I don't really see the point of not using a password, but you can do that. Okay, another thing you might want to do, like let's say I'm making this change and I know that the person I'm sending this to is going to look at that and go, what is Barron talking about? That's not wrong. And I want to explain myself. That is the point of comments, explaining yourself. Or maybe you just want to point out an issue. You want to bring something up. Now, I don't want to type it in the body of the document. I just want it to be out to the side. That's when you'll use comments. So ideally select what it is you want to comment on, and then click new comment. And you're going to get this enormous Fisher Price thing, this giant box that apparently I have no control over the size of it, but I have to type my comment. So this is my comment. And then is that enough to make the comment? Oh no, you have to click this little paper airplane for some reason, or hit Control Enter to quote, post your comment. Now in earlier versions of Word, you didn't have to do any of that. And the boxes weren't ginormous like that. But in the latest version of Word, they, in my opinion, made comments less useful. That's the nicest way I can phrase it. And now I have to click the paper airplane to quote, post my comment. Now, what's good about this? Well, obviously they can see if they click on it, it's going to put this, if I click on this little guy right here, if there was multiple comments, let's say I added another comment here and new comment and test and paper airplane. Okay, so when I click on this, you can see it brings to the front the one that is relevant to what I've clicked on. So at least there's some linkage there. There's no longer a line. You know, there used to be a dotted line that connected them, and for some reason they thought, well, that was useful, so we got to get rid of it. But otherwise, it's not terrible. And then you can, and you've been able to do this for a while, have a little conversation inside these little comment bubbles. So if the person who reads this goes, okay, I understand, they can write that in there. And then if the whole thing is resolved because, they said, okay, I'm totally good with that, then I can click the three little dots. If I hit resolve, it's going to make it look like the bubble disappeared, but I still have this guy right here. And let me just show you a different way to view your comments that some people prefer. You'll notice there's a drop down up here under the show comments, and I can switch to list. And list will show me all the comments, even the ones that have been resolved, because this comment is still here, right? It's no longer an issue. So if I want to get rid of a resolved comment, then I can click the little trash can here. And if I go back to contextual, which was this guy, if I click here, you see what happened when I did that? All that did was switch my view from contextual to list. So if I click on a comment that I can no longer see, it will change its view automatically so that I can see it. And then if I want to, I can trash can it and get rid of it. So that's another thing I didn't really talk about. But when I'm going back and forth on a document, if I send version 1 and they do whatever and send it back to me before I even touch it, I right-click Save As and I save it as version 2. Then I open it and I do whatever I'm going to do, incorporate changes, reject changes, add comments, and I'm probably going to send this back to the other side again. Before I send it, version 3. They do whatever they do, they send it back. Before I touch it, version 4. Then I work with it, version 5. I know that seems crazy, but I like to see the history of that document, where it came from and what people were thinking. And sometimes it can establish intent when you go back and look at it. So maybe end up with a bunch of files, but sometimes it's worth it.
I also want to note that some people will use, they'll type into the document to make snarky comments or other comments about strategy, saying, well, we should remove this or change this or move that. And they put it in square brackets, thinking that that might be enough for them to remember that it's there. And it's not. Comments will help you find it. You can also clear all comments using the metadata clearing tool or some other tools that will prompt you to remove them at the end. But one judge recently was disciplined for her snarky comments that were in the body of the document, and they would have been noticeable, found, and deleted had she used the comments feature instead. So that level of tech competency can save you from having some of your internal snarkiness or deliberations exposed to other people.
Right on. So that's, I guess the takeaway on comments is use them. They're even though the new ones are kind of annoying because they're so big, they're still quite useful for conveying your thoughts, and it'll cut down on the length of the phone call you might otherwise have to discuss the changes that you would put in there.
And it can be a training tool for somebody else who's helping you. So if you are the experienced subject matter expert and you are coaching somebody on how to draft this document, if you use the comments feature, you can coach somebody through why you made the changes that you did, and they can reference that later, and it becomes a learning tool rather than something that was just all read and the partner bled on. So it will be better received, and it becomes a useful thing going forward rather than an admonishment of the work that you did before.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so one more thing, this reviewing pane over here, you can turn that on and off, and then you can see all the changes in a list. And to the extent that's useful, that's just the reviewing pane here that does that. Okay, so let's say I'm not using track changes. I've got two versions of a document, and all I want to know is what's the difference between them. All right, pretty easy to do this. We're going to go to compare and down to compare. And now remember, click more, and you'll see that you get a lot more choices in terms of what is going to show up. Like, I don't care about formatting, so I always uncheck formatting. I want word level as opposed to character level. This is a little more granular. I want the whole word to show me if it's different, and I want those changes encapsulated in a new document. So then I'm going to click the little browse button, and I'm going to go find, version 1 or 2 or whatever of the document I'm trying to compare. I'm going to click this little guy, and I'm going to come over here and pick version 2. And I'm going to click open. Now, the first time you run a red line, it's a little frightening what the screen looks like. You can see what I'm talking about here. A reviewing pane appears to have disappeared. So I get the reviewing pane, I get the red line, and then I get the original and the revised document. And there's synchronous scrolling turned on, which I'm like, okay, but the whole reason that I did this was I just wanted this I don't need to see all this other stuff. So what you can do is simply click the little X's and the X's, and then click the X over here. And now, whenever you run a red line again in the future, it will only show you the red line instead of all that other stuff. So it does remember that particular setting. But now that I've gotten to this point, I can say this is a new version, click next, and accept or reject the changes as I surf through the document and end up with a nice clean one at the end. Or if I'm going to send this to the other side because they sent me a separate version back, I can still use the comments, of course, just like I did previously. So this is a very good, the only thing I would complain about with this is sometimes Word will just give up and it will say, this whole paragraph is different, even if, let's say it's a 4-sentence paragraph and 3 of the 4 sentences were different, it'll just strike the whole thing. Like it won't point out that they actually share a common sentence. And that's mildly annoying. And one other thing to be aware of is if something has been moved, it will be in green. It only uses green for moved things. So if you looked at my default settings that we were in earlier, you'll see track moves, that's checked by default, moved from and moved to, green. So if you're looking at a red line, either with track changes had been used or it was a compare, and you see a green paragraph that's underlined, here's what you know. There's another green paragraph of the same paragraph that is struck through somewhere else in the document because that's just telling you they put it someplace else. So that's the only time it uses green, just so you know about that. Anything else, Ivy?
One of the great things about track changes is that you can use it with other add-ins and tools that you've been using. You just need to remember the order of operations. If you're going to use another add-in first, or if you're going to use another add-in, then you should use it first. For instance, if you would like WordRake to help you decide what to edit or change in your document, then you would run WordRake first, which actually uses content controls. With track changes turned on, you would accept or reject your changes, and those would be recorded as if the changes came from you. And then if you want to go and add more changes, then you could do that with track changes. However, if you run track changes first, you cannot then get feedback from WordRake after that. You can do it simultaneously, you can do it consecutively, but you cannot run track changes first. And it's a great way to get all of those little details out of the way and get to the value of a 4th or 5th draft with only one click. Thank you so much.
This video was created by Ivy Gray from WordRake and Baron Henley from Affinity Consulting, who both trained as lawyers and are now Microsoft Word and Outlook enthusiasts and productivity experts. This video is part of a series. To sign up to receive tech tips and training videos via email, please visit wordrake.com/tech-tips. Once you've seen the benefit of receiving editing feedback and track changes, you'll wish you could get that feedback for everything you write. Wouldn't you love a friend who was always available, never tired, and gave good advice on how to streamline your sentences and get rid of the clutter? WordRake is your new best friend. At any time of day or night, our software will edit your writing for clarity and brevity using inline editing suggestions. Your raked document will look just like a smart colleague has revised your work using track changes. Then you decide which edits you like. If you'd like to learn more, sign up to receive tech tips and training videos at wordrake.com/tech-tips. When you're ready to take your work to the next level, try WordRake. WordRake is clear and concise editing software that will improve your writing while respecting legally operative phrases and key legal content. It's a finely tuned collaborator that will help you satisfy clients, win more business, and do more high-value work. WordRake works in Microsoft Word and Outlook. It goes beyond Microsoft's built-in spelling and grammar checkers to help you reduce legalese and wordy writing. It uses complex, patented algorithms to find useless words, dull phrases, weak lead-ins, cliches, and high-level grammatical problems, then offers suggested edits in line. Your raked document will look just like a smart colleague with an English degree has revised your work using track changes. In 3 simple steps, you'll have a better document or email. Try it today at wordrake.com/trial.